They didn't even lower their voices. Just sat 2 rooms away, sipping white wine and slicing apricots for the kids' breakfast, and said it as plainly as reading a recipe. Don't bring her. She'll slow us down. I was by the laundry bench, folding Lena's pajama set when those words hit. My hands froze mid-fold, like I'd just opened a window in the dead of winter. You know how she is, my daughter-in-law added, her voice coated with casual dismissal. She won't keep up with the activities. Honestly, it'll just make everything harder. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My son didn't argue. Just gave a low hum, as if he'd already made peace with the decision. I had paid the deposit nearly a month ago. Reserved my place the day they told me about the cruise. They called it a family adventure, something the kids would remember for the rest of their lives. I even offered to help cover the suite, and Clara had brushed it off with that smile that never quite reached her eyes. No need, Lorna. Just your company is enough. Apparently, it wasn't. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. I helped Lena find her blue glasses, reminded Felix to pack his swim trunks. I moved through the house like a guest in someone else's rhythm. They weren't unkind, my son and Clara. Just efficient. Polite, even. They kept me looped into the planning barely. Asked if I preferred trout or chicken. Mentioned we'd be docking in San Aurelio. But now I saw it clearly. It wasn't inclusion. It was tolerance. They'd let me come if I insisted, but deep down, they hoped I wouldn't. I was the backup plan. The spare seat. The extra set of hands in case someone got queasy. That night, long after the house had gone quiet, I sat alone at the kitchen table. One hand on my checkbook, the other around a glass of something aged and untouched since my 60s. My cruise itinerary lay nearby, balcony suite, deck 3, connecting room to the kids. I stared at it for a long while. Then I picked up the phone. Royal Horizon Voyages. How may I assist you? Yes, I said. I'd like to cancel my current booking. No, I'm not changing my mind. I'd like to upgrade. Pause. What's the most private suite you have available? The woman hesitated. That would be our Monarch suite, ma'am. It includes a private veranda, dedicated concierge, exclusive dining access. I'll take it. She hesitated again. It's considerably more expensive. I'm 78, I replied. I've been reusing paper towels and stretching stew meat since the Reagan years. I'll take it. She gave a nervous chuckle and processed the change. When she read the total, I didn't even blink. I gave her my card details, confirmed early boarding, and ended the call. Then I just sat there, fingers curled around the glass. So this was what it felt like, not to ask for space in your own family, but to claim it. I didn't tell them. Let them believe I'd be back in Irisville, watering ferns and feeding the neighbor's cat while they lounged with cocktails on sun chairs. It suited them. And for once, it suited me too. 2 days before departure, Clara sent a cheerful text. We're getting excited. Weather looks perfect. So glad we got that time with you last weekend. I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled my best suitcase out from the hall closet, the one with leather corners and wheels that didn't squeak. I packed carefully. 2 sundresses. Comfortable sandals. The midnight blue jumpsuit I'd always deemed too elegant for Sunday service. And last of all, my husband's old Panama hat, the one he wore on our honeymoon in the Caymans. He would have adored this little rebellion. The morning of departure dawned clear and golden. I wore white slacks, a soft rose blouse, and my mother's pearl earrings. At the port in Belgrave Bay, I waited in the priority boarding line. A young man in a navy blazer took my luggage and smiled at the name on the manifest. Monarch Suite, Ms. Lell. Welcome aboard. Not Mom. Not Grandma. Not Lorna the Burden. Just Ms. Lell. As the gangway clanged beneath my shoes, I didn't look back. My family wouldn't arrive for another 4 hours. By then, I'd be sipping chilled Рафаэлlo White on a terrace large enough for a small orchestra while they stood in line for buffet access bands. Let the ship sail. I wasn't chasing them anymore. The suite door closed behind me with a soft click, and for a moment, I just stood there, breathing, listening to the hush of it all. Suite 1401, Monarch class. I had never stayed anywhere like it, not on land, let alone at sea. Sunlight poured through wall-linked windows. cream-colored furniture, fresh orchids in a crystal vase, a private veranda where the ocean already stretched out in endless cobalt ribbons. I set my bag down gently, like I was stepping into someone else's story. The knock came within minutes. A young man, early 20s, maybe, stood in a crisp uniform, posture perfect. "Good afternoon, Ms. Lell. I'm Ezra, your personal assistant for the duration of the cruise. May I help you unpack?" I blinked. "I think I can manage." He smiled with professional grace. "Of course. If you need anything room service, dining preferences, private outings, just dial 0. We're here to make your experience unforgettable." Unforgettable. That was a word I hadn't heard directed at me in a very long time. Not sincerely. Not since my husband passed. After Ezra left, I walked out onto the terrace. The breeze greeted me like an old friend, brushing my face, lifting the edges of my hair. I closed my eyes and leaned into the railing, breathing deep and slow. No chores waiting. No small voices calling. No half-made plans I'd been folded into at the last minute. Just me, the open sea, and the quiet, liberating truth that no one, not a soul, expected me to be here. At lunch, I didn't head toward the buffet line like I always had on past family vacations. Instead, I walked into the adults-only dining room where a pianist played low, smooth jazz, and the waitstaff refilled water and wine glasses without being asked. The maitre d' greeted me with a nod and led me to a window-side table as if I belonged. I caught a couple across from me whispering as I took my seat. "Presidential suite," the woman murmured, her tone laced with admiration. I kept my eyes on the menu, pretending not to notice. I wasn't sure what they saw when they looked at me. Someone poised? Someone who belonged? That thought startled me more than it should have. I ordered grilled red snapper and a glass of chilled white, something citrusy and dry. I ate slowly, deliberately, letting each bite linger. No one asked when I'd be done. No one tugged at my sleeve or tapped the table for attention. For once, the moment was mine. After lunch, I wandered the upper decks, not lost, just curious. There was a spa tucked behind a solarium on the 12th floor, a small art theater beside a piano bar, and a library hidden behind frosted doors. I passed the children's splash zone and spotted my grandson Leo tugging on Clara's hand. Her son had slipped sideways, and she looked exhausted. My son, Adrian, was arguing with a crew member over a tangle of mismatched luggage. He looked frustrated, arms flailing in that familiar way that meant things weren't going according to plan. They didn't see me. I didn't stop. By the time they reached their assigned stateroom, an interior unit, no windows, I was already back on my private terrace, enjoying a fruit platter and the first few chapters of The Mirror Fractured Twice, one of the old mystery novels I'd packed for the trip. Fitting title, I thought. That evening, I dressed for the captain's welcome dinner, not out of obligation, but because I genuinely wanted to. I wore a deep emerald silk blouse I'd bought years ago, but never dared to wear, paired with gray slacks that still hugged just right. Pearl bracelet. A little lipstick. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I hadn't seen in a very long time. Not elegant, perhaps, but unmistakably present. The ballroom shimmered with warm lights and laughter. Polished cutlery clinked against glass. Polite conversation filled the air, and the room hummed with that understated elegance people chase, but rarely find. I found a seat near the back, content just to watch. Eventually, the captain raised his glass. To our guests in the Royal and Monarch suites, he said warmly, "Thank you for sailing with us." And to our guest in the presidential suite, Ms. Lell, "We hope this voyage exceeds every expectation." Heads turned with polite interest. I smiled and gave a single nod. Someone raised a glass in my direction. A soft ripple of recognition passed through the room. It wasn't grand. It wasn't loud. But it was enough. I was seen. Later that night, I pulled the curtains wide and left the glass doors open. The breeze slipped in like a sigh. I sat outside, wrapped in a robe, toes bare against the cool tile, sipping chamomile tea as the ship whispered forward through the dark sea. I didn't know what the next day would bring, whether they'd catch sight of me, whether the illusion would shatter. But for now, I had peace. And I wasn't sharing it. Not yet. I woke early to the hush of waves breathing against the hull, that slow rhythm only the sea could keep. The sky was a soft gray, just beginning to shift into gold. For the first time in years, no alarm had sounded. No child had cried. No door had knocked. I simply woke because I was done sleeping. I made myself coffee from the small machine on the vanity, pressing its buttons like solving a puzzle. The beans were freshly ground. The cream real, not powdered. I took the cup outside, sat on the veranda, wrapped again in my robe, and watched the sun rise over the horizon. It was golden, gentle, quiet, warm. The ocean didn't care about my age. It didn't ask what I had left to offer. It didn't expect me to hurry or speak softly or take up less space. Somewhere below, I imagined Clara telling Leo to sit still as she dabbed sunscreen on little Ella's cheeks. Adrian would be glued to his phone, scanning emails, trying to manage things from 600 miles away. That had always been his way, trying to control the uncontrollable. I had hoped I'd taught him better. Maybe not. But I didn't dwell. After breakfast, delivered steaming and meticulously arranged, I decided to visit the onboard gallery. It was tucked beside the wine lounge, serene and almost hidden. I wandered quietly between the canvases, enjoying the hush. A woman stood near the center, studying a large, abstract piece in crimson and navy. She glanced over at me with a kind smile. "Do you see anything in it?" she asked. "I see a fight," I said. "Or maybe the end of one." She laughed softly. That's more than I got. Her name was Irene. A widow, too, from Windermere, traveling solo. We strolled the exhibit together, talking the way only older women can, when there's no need for sugarcoating or small talk. Her daughter hadn't wanted her to come. "It's a long trip, Mom. You'll be tired. Maybe next year." That, Irene said, was exactly what made her book it. Out of pure, blessed spite. "I like you already," I told her. We agreed to meet later for the beginner's dance class. I hadn't danced since the community hall socials back in the 80s. I nearly backed out, told myself my knees weren't what they used to be, that I'd look foolish. But a quiet part of me whispered, maybe that's the point. But at 2 sharp, I showed up. The instructor was a tall, magnetic man from Santiago del Sol, with the kind of charm that filled a room before he even spoke. He took his time with each of us, guiding us through the rhythm of a slow salsa, step by step, turn by turn, with patient encouragement and just enough flirtation to make us laugh. Irene gave me a sly wink as I twirled. My steps were awkward, but steady. My body protested, yes, but my spirit didn't. It felt good. Strange, but good. Later, I learned the family had missed their scheduled excursion. A couple at the table behind me during dinner was talking about it over dessert. Some poor folks got left behind, the woman said. Their kid had a meltdown. Whole group had to rearrange the trip. I sipped my wine and said nothing. Back in the suite, I filled the oversized marble tub and let myself sink into the heat until my skin softened like pressed linen. I thought about their cramped cabin. The kids likely bouncing on the beds, Malcolm flipping through his planner, Brielle quietly fuming that the day hadn't gone according to script. I felt no guilt. It wasn't that I didn't love them. I did. But that love had been worn thin over the years, stretched like an old sweater that never quite fit anymore. They loved the version of me that was useful, quiet, always available, easy to overlook unless needed. That version was gone. After the bath, I slipped into my cotton nightgown, pulled the covers up to my chin, and opened my book. Hercule Poirot was halfway through exposing the killer when I heard something through the wall. Faint, muffled voices. Laughter. A child's laughter. Leo. My heart stopped. I'd forgotten that one edge of the suite was adjoining. I hadn't checked the deck layouts when I upgraded, only that I'd have privacy, space, and distance. But of course, families with children didn't stay on the uppermost decks. They'd been placed below, or so I thought. But if the Children's Activity Center was nearby, or if they'd been upgraded at the last minute. Too close. I turned off the lights and walked quietly to the door, pressing one eye to the peephole. The hallway was empty. I told myself I was being ridiculous. There were nearly 3,000 passengers on this ship. It was a coincidence. And yet, I felt the first tremor of risk. Let them see me, Part of me dared. Let them knock, ask how I manage this. Let them squirm. But the deeper part, the quiet, settled part, just wanted a little more time. One more day of not being a utility. One more night of being more than background noise in someone else's life. So I stayed silent. Let the ship sail. Let them believe I was home in Windmere Ridge, tending plants and waiting for cruise photos. I had no intention of returning to being anyone's shadow. The fourth morning arrived under a sky of soft silver clouds, low and streaked, the kind that hinted at rain but rarely delivered it at sea. I pulled a shawl around my shoulders and stepped out onto the terrace. The horizon had blurred into mist. We were drifting somewhere between 𝑾𝒐𝒖𝒍𝒅𝒏'𝒕 and the northern edge of Margaret Bay, far enough from everything that had ever tethered me. Room service arrived with a quiet knock. Fresh papaya slices, warm croissants, and a pot of tea steeped just right. Lucas, always composed, stood at the door with his clipboard in hand. "Good morning, Miss Lowe. There's a wine tasting this afternoon and a jazz trio performing in the Azure Lounge tonight. If you'd like, I can reserve a front table." My first instinct was to say no. The reflex to remain small, unremarkable, still whispered. But I paused. "Yes," I said. "Both." He smiled warmly. "Excellent. Also, your laundry has been returned, pressed and folded, just as requested." I thanked him. And once he was gone, I actually laughed. Pressed and folded. When was the last time someone had done something for me without needing anything in return? Not since the hospital, probably, when Malcolm had shown up late with a single daffodil and his Bluetooth still wedged in his ear. I slid the balcony door shut and walked over to the wardrobe. My navy jumpsuit hung there, perfectly smooth, wrinkle-free. I laid it gently across the bed. Maybe tonight, I thought. For the jazz. That's when I heard it. A knock not at my door, but the one beside mine. I went still. Then came the voice. "Room service for the Thompsons. Brielle." I sank down slowly onto the edge of the bed. It made sense now. I hadn't checked which rooms bordered mine. I just clicked upgrade and breathed in the promise of space. But of course, they'd been bumped from their original cabin when it was overbooked. Cruise lines did that. It happened. And of all the rooms on this massive, floating city, fate had put them right next to me. For several long minutes, I sat motionless, heart ticking loud in my chest. Through the shared wall, I could hear her voice again, softer now, telling Leo to use his quiet voice. I heard the tiny footsteps of Ella pattering across the floor. Then a crash. Something hit the ground. A sigh followed, long and tired. I should have felt satisfaction. Should have savored the irony. But I didn't. I felt hollow. When had we become this? Strangers sharing a woe. That afternoon, I stepped out into the hallway just as Malcolm rounded the corner, a towel slung over one shoulder. I instinctively turned away, fumbling with my key card like any ordinary guest. He didn't glance my way, didn't pause. I watched his back disappear down the corridor. Back in my suite, I stared at my reflection. Lipstick faded. Gray hair gathered into a soft knot. Nothing remarkable, just an old woman adrift on a ship full of strangers. I almost reached up to wipe my eyes, but I didn't. At the wine tasting, I met a couple from Northwick, retirees who'd sold their home and decided to spend their later years on the water. "We don't see the kids much anymore," the man said with a shrug. "They're always busy." His wife nodded. "We used to feel guilty," she said. "Now we just feel rested." I let out a quiet laugh. "I'm learning," I said. The jazz trio that night played Ellington and Simone, their melodies soft and golden like warm rain. I sat in the front row alone, but not lonely, letting the music wrap around me. Across the lounge, I spotted Irene again, wrapped in a deep red shawl and wearing a smile that looked earned. She waved her fingers at me during intermission. "You dance?" she asked. "I used to." "Well," she said, standing, "tonight you do again." And I did. We laughed, swayed, stumbled, and caught one another's hands like children playing at elegance. And for a moment, I wasn't 78. I wasn't anyone's mother or grandmother. I was just Lel, a woman who remembered how it felt to be moved. Back in the suite, I changed into my robe, placed my book beside the bed, and stepped out onto the terrace. The sea was ink black and scattered with stars. The ship moved steady and slow beneath my bare feet. Next door, their lights were still on. I could hear them not arguing, not laughing, just the soft, tired murmur of a family trying to make it through another day. I leaned on the railing, breathing in the salt-tinged air. Let them be close. Let them stay unaware. For now, I wanted no confrontation, no surprise reunion, no pointed conversations. Just one more night beneath unfamiliar stars, in a space I chose, on a path that finally felt like it belonged to me. The rain came sometime before dawn. First a whisper, then steady, rhythmic, tapping gently on the glass like someone asking politely to come inside. I woke without an alarm, though I never set one here. Back home in Harbor Mill, it was Max's cartoons or the mail carrier's slam that pulled me from sleep. But now, on the 5th morning of this quiet rebellion, only the rain and the murmuring of the ship stirred me. I didn't open the curtains right away, just lay still beneath the heavy hotel-style duvet, watching light filter gray through the sheer drapes. I wondered if Brielle would try to keep the children inside today, if Malcolm would grumble about the canceled snorkeling excursion. The itinerary tucked in my suite folder said we were scheduled to anchor at Isla Rowan, a small island off the coast of San Mariel, by noon. But with this rain? Unlikely. I didn't mind. I hadn't planned to leave the ship anyway. Everything I needed was already here. After a long, luxurious shower, longer than I ever allowed myself at home with its leaky pipes and guilt over the water bill, I dressed in a loose linen blouse and slate gray slacks. I braided my hair loosely and pinned it back. No one would be watching. And I liked it that way. Lucas brought breakfast again, cheerful, unbothered by the weather. "Good morning, Miss Lell," he said, handing over the tray. "We've added cinnamon rolls today, just out of the oven. The chef remembered you mentioned them on the first day." I blinked, surprised. "I did." He smiled, teasing. "You did. You said, I haven't had a good one since '85. He took it as a personal challenge. I laughed, caught off guard. "Well, let's see if he wins." I carried the tray to the small table by the window as the sky outside deepened into a stormy slate. Rain streamed down the balcony glass in graceful arcs. The cinnamon roll was warm, flaky, and delicately spiced. Not too sweet, just right. And somehow, in that moment, I felt more cared for than I had in months. Later, I wandered the ship again. On rainy days, the corridors stayed quieter. Most passengers holed up in their cabins, watching movies or bickering gently behind closed doors. I passed by the Children's Activity Center and paused at the small round window. "Hi." Lily's unmistakable voice, urgent, questioning. Always asking why. I peered in just long enough to see her seated cross-legged on a bright blue mat, crayons in hand. Leo sat beside her, focused, coloring something intently. The young woman leading the activity wore the kind of broad, sunny smile I remembered well, beautiful, but destined to fade after a few hours of chaos. I didn't linger. In the atrium, the crew had set out tea and board games on low tables. I joined two older women deep in a Scrabble match. They were mid-debate over whether Vex counted. "It's a real word," I said. They laughed. We kept playing. I stayed for an hour, not because the company was unforgettable, but because it reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. How to simply sit with people. No expectations. No demands. Just time, gently shared. After lunch, the rain tapered off to a mist. I returned to my suite, slid open the terrace door, and let the damp air roll in. The sea had settled again, calm as silk. I curled into the lounge chair with a paperback and read 3 chapters before I realized just how silent everything had become. Then I heard it. A knock. Not at my door. Next door. I told myself not to move. But I did. Slowly, noiselessly, I stepped toward the shared wall. I pressed my ear gently to the cool surface. Malcolm's voice low and clipped. "We have to figure something out. She's not picking up. And they won't let us rebook without a penalty." Malcolm's voice came sharp through the wall. "I told you we shouldn't have relied on the excursion desk. We're not priority passengers." "Malcolm, don't start." Brielle's reply was low, tight with fatigue. Then came a pause. And Leo's small voice. I miss Grandma. I stood frozen beside the wall, breath still. Brielle sighed audibly. She's home, sweetheart. You'll see her after the trip. Another silence. Then Ella. She's not home. I saw her. My heart jolted, stopped for half a beat. Malcolm chuckled. What do you mean, pumpkin? Ella again. I saw her. The lady on the deck with the big balcony. She looks like Grandma. Brielle's voice dropped, sharp with doubt. That's not possible. I stepped back, my chest thudding in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not fear. Something adjacent. The sudden tremble of being seen. I pressed both palms flat against the cool marble counter. Let them wonder. Let them spin. I owed them nothing. That night, I skipped the main dining room. Instead, I ordered dinner to the suite, lamb chops, herbed potatoes, and a glass of red that warmed me more than any apology ever could. I sat by the window and watched the sea roll beneath the fading light. They might know now. They might not. But I wasn't hiding anymore. Not from them. Not from myself. The next morning arrived clear and crisp, as if the storm had scoured the sky clean. I opened the terrace doors to a breeze rich with salt and sunlight. Somewhere on the deck below, I could hear chairs scraping tile, the distant call of a game organizer, children's laughter carried upward like wind chimes. The ship had woken, and so had I. I dressed slowly, without rush. Simple cotton slacks, a sea glass green blouse, my best leather sandals, the ones I never wore back in Maple Hollow because they felt too elegant for errands. There were no errands here. No one to impress. No one to please. Only myself. A note from Lucas sat atop the breakfast tray. Chef's table invitations available this evening. Would you like me to secure a seat, Miss Lull? I scribbled back, yes, please. One guest. Then paused. And underlined the final words before folding the note in half. The day moved slowly, deliberately. I wandered along the upper decks, stopping to read the history plaques near the shuffleboard court, watched sun-drenched teenagers spill from the smoothie bar in sandals and wrapped towels, giddy from too much sun and not enough sleep. No one gave me a second glance. And I liked it that way. It reminded me what I'd nearly forgotten, how to simply exist. Without explanation. Without a role. In the early afternoon, I found a quiet lounge at the rear of the ship. Nearly empty. Just a man in a Panama hat absorbed in his newspaper and two women playing cards in silence near the window. I ordered iced tea and settled into a seat facing the sea. There, in that stillness, I heard it. Grandma. I turned. Leo stood near the entrance, holding a worn deck of playing cards, blinking like he wasn't quite sure I was real. I smiled gently. Hello, sweetheart. He didn't run to me. Didn't shout. Just stood there, wide-eyed, his small mouth slightly open. Are you? He whispered. Are you here alone? I am, I said softly. And so are you right now? He nodded. We're supposed to be looking for the trivia room. Mom and Dad are fighting again. He fidgeted with the cards. She said the excursions are a mess, and the dinner reservations are all mixed up. He shrugged. They're mad a lot. I reached into my handbag, pulled out a wrapped butterscotch, and held it out. He stepped forward, took it silently, and sat down beside me. We sat like that for a while. Quiet. Steady. He didn't ask questions. I didn't offer answers. Sometimes presence is enough. When the candy was gone, he looked up. I miss you. I swallowed hard. I miss you too. Are you going to come to dinner? Not tonight, I said. But you can always visit me here. He nodded slowly, like he was filing away a secret too important to forget. Then a flicker of worry crossed his face. Should I tell them I saw you? I smiled. Only if you want to. He hesitated, then stood. I'll go find the trivia. Leo. He turned. Tell Ella I like her drawings, I said. Even when they're on napkins. His face lit up into a grin. And then he was gone. I stayed there for a while longer, hand still resting where his had been. My heart hadn't caught up to the moment yet. I should have felt exposed, like the curtain was being pulled back. But I didn't, because something about Leo's quiet understanding grounded me. Back in the suite, I rang Lucas. I'll be attending the chef's table this evening, I said. just one. That night, I wore the soft lavender blouse I'd brought for no reason at all. Pearl earrings I hadn't worn in a decade. The kind of things people used to notice. The table was long and gleaming, set with cards and crystal. There were 8 of us, a retired surgeon, a couple celebrating 40 years of marriage, 2 sisters from Montreville, and a man in his mid-60s with dark eyes and a journalist's stillness who introduced himself simply as Clark. "I haven't seen you at many events," he said, after the first course. "I've been hiding." He raised a brow. "From whom?" I smiled. "Everyone. A noble pastime," he said. The meal stretched on for 2 unhurried hours. And for the first time in a very long while, I wasn't waiting for someone to need me. I was simply there. Scallops in saffron cream. Lamb glazed in deep red wine reduction. A towering, absurd sculpture of pistachio and chocolate mousse that wobbled on the plate like it knew it was showing off. Wine flowed. Laughter deepened. By the time dessert arrived, Clark leaned toward me, eyes sharp with quiet amusement. "You're not really hiding," he said. "You're waiting." That night, barefoot on the terrace, the moon etching a silver path across the waves, I felt it, not triumph, not vindication, but something gentler. Readiness. They could find me. They could ask. They could pick at the silence I had so carefully constructed. And I wouldn't run. It was nearly midday when I saw them, my entire family, clustered around the large display map on the midship observation deck. Vrielle held a guidebook open in front of her like a shield. Malcolm pointed at something with a borrowed pen from the kids' club, the other hand gripping a walkie-talkie. Ella leaned over the railing, barefoot, face turned into the wind. Leo. Leo stood slightly apart. They didn't see me. I was 3 levels above, tucked into the shadows behind a tinted glass panel near the adults-only sun deck. My grapefruit soda sparkled like rare champagne as I sipped it slowly, watching them. They looked tired. Not just sunscreen and sugar crash tired. Not just cranky kid tired. Exhausted. In the way people get when they're pretending things are fine for too long. They'd changed again. Brielle wore a loose linen blouse and sensible sandals, items she wouldn't be caught dead in back in Claywood Hills. A quiet surrender to practicality. Malcolm's shirt was wrinkled, his jaw clenching and releasing like a man struggling to hold the edges together. And still, as I sat high above, invisible, shaded, dry, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt something far more complicated. Back in my suite, I called Lucas. "Would you mind canceling my dinner reservation tonight?" "Of course, Miss Lell." "Everything all right?" "Everything's just fine," I said. "I think I need a quiet evening." But instead of staying in, I wandered. Not the usual Deck 5 stroll or a lap around the promenade, but deeper, down to the service levels, where few passengers ever ventured. Past the laundry chute, the staff galley, and a tucked-away cafe behind the art gallery that never made it into the brochures. I ordered black tea and took my seat in the corner booth. The place smelled of steamed milk and cinnamon. 2 pages into my book, someone slid quietly into the bench across from me. It was Irene. "You're hiding," she said, her tone light. "I'm resting," I corrected. "There's a difference." She chuckled. "I heard you made quite the impression at the chef's dinner last night. Clark said you shut down a Texan oil man with 1 sentence about foie gras, and it was the highlight of his trip." He said that. I blinked. I didn't even think anyone was listening. "Oh, he was," she said, grinning. And so was half the table. We drank our tea in silence for a while, the kind of silence you only earn with age. At some point, she reached across and gently touched my hand. "You know," she said quietly, "I saw a boy, your grandson, I think, leaving the trivia lounge yesterday. He looked like he'd been holding his breath." "Leo," I murmured. "He saw me." She nodded. "He did. And he kept the secret. Good boy." Later that evening, I wandered back up just in time for movie night on the upper deck. Some animated comedy with dancing penguins and slapstick whales. The kind of thing meant to make kids squeal and adults chuckle half-heartedly. Bean bags and blankets. Cups of hot cocoa. Families clustered under borrowed throws. Teenagers trying not to act like they were enjoying themselves. I slipped into a chaise lounge near the back. And there they were again. Brielle tucked a blanket around Ella's legs. Malcolm balanced a tub of popcorn on one knee. Leo sat between them, unusually still. Midway through the film, Leo stood and walked off. I followed, quietly, a few paces behind. He wandered to the portside stairwell, down one flight, then stopped. Turned. Searched the shadows. His eyes found me. He didn't speak. He walked up silent. And then he did something unexpected. He hugged me. No words. Just arms around my waist. Face pressed to my blouse. I rested my hand on the back of his head and held him close. After a long moment, he pulled away slightly. "They're kind of a mess," he said matter-of-factly. "I know. I told Ella you're here. She says you're magic." I laughed softly. She might be right. He grinned, a tooth missing, like a half-completed sentence. "I don't want to go home." "You don't have to yet." He looked up. "Are you mad at them?" "No," I said truthfully. "Just tired." He nodded like he understood more than his age should allow. "Me too." When he turned to go, I let him. Back in the suite, I sat with the lights off. No television. No music. Just the hush of the ocean's breath sliding past the hull. No one knocked. No one called. Only the echo of Leo's small truth. They're kind of a mess. We all are, I suppose. Some of us just learn to carry it more quietly. The next encounter wasn't planned. But then again, nothing meaningful ever is. It was the morning of the snorkeling stop banal, I think. I hadn't signed up. I had no interest in slippery flippers or seeing my reflection in a fogged-up mask. Instead, I took my breakfast in the 𝑾𝒐𝒖𝒍𝒅𝒏'𝒕, a serene, glass-walled space high above the waves, where the sea looked like it was being smoothed by invisible hands. I was halfway through my toast, butter melting just so, when I heard it, Malcolm's voice. "Excuse me, is there still time to register? We were waitlisted yesterday." I froze. The cafe wasn't private, not truly. It was listed as adults only, but enforcement was lax. Anyone could wander in. I shifted slightly in my chair, angling my body toward the window. My reflection was faint in the glass, a woman in soft blue, pearl earrings catching the morning light, sipping tea as if the world outside didn't matter. Footsteps approached, then stopped. Silence. A breath. "Mom." I didn't turn. I didn't need to. I could feel him behind me, eyes fixed on the back of my head, like someone unsure if they were looking at reality or at guilt made visible by salt, air, and sun. I reached calmly for my cup. "Mom," he said again, quieter. I turned slowly. Our eyes met. It wasn't cinematic. No swell of music. No tears. Just two people who hadn't really seen each other in far too long. "Daniel," I said, with a nod. Polite. Unrushed. He blinked. "You're here." So it would seem. But he faltered. You said you weren't coming." "No," I corrected, setting my cup gently on its saucer. "I said nothing. You assumed." His face flushed not with shame, but with something sharper, frustration. "I thought Brielle and we thought you'd be more comfortable at home." "More useful, you mean?" His mouth opened, then closed again. The cafe had grown quieter. A nearby couple leaned in over their plates. Conversation softened. I stood, smoothed the hem of my blouse. "I'll be in my suite," I said, evenly. "If you want to talk." "Alone." He hesitated, then nodded. I didn't look back to see if he followed. Back in Suite 1401, I paced, not nervously, just enough to keep my thoughts from settling too tightly. I replayed every word, every glance. I should have been shaking, but I wasn't. When the knock came, it was soft, deliberate. Daniel stepped inside like a man entering a confessional. "It's nice," he said, eyes scanning the room. "It's mine," I replied. He looked at me, really looked, and for a moment I saw not the man with the gray at his temples and the too tight jaw, but the boy who once gripped my hand on the first day of school, knuckles pale with nerves. "I didn't know," he said. "No," I answered. "Because you didn't ask." Silence. "I guess I assumed you wouldn't want to travel alone." I raised an eyebrow. That I wouldn't enjoy the sea? Or the sun? Or a glass of wine on a quiet deck? He sank into a chair, sighing. "It's not like that." "No," I said, taking the seat opposite him. "But from where I sit, Daniel, it's exactly like that." He didn't argue. You planned a family cruise. Told the kids it was for everyone. You told them I'd be happier at home. But you didn't offer. You didn't ask. You decided. His hands flexed open and closed in his lap. Leo found me, I added. Didn't say much. Just sat beside me for a while. Daniel looked up. He said something about seeing you. I didn't believe him. Because it didn't fit the story, I said. He winced. I'm sorry. I nodded. I believe you. And I did. But I also knew the truth. Sorry is just a word until someone proves they mean it. I'm not angry, I said. Not really. Just done pretending this is all I'm meant for. He nodded slowly. I understand. I doubted he fully did. But maybe, just maybe, he wanted to. Why didn't you tell us? He asked after a pause. That you booked this. That you were here. I smiled faintly. Because I didn't need to. He stayed 10 more minutes. Talked about the weather. The kids. The lobster buffet, which he declared dramatically overrated. And then he stood uncertain. Will you come to dinner tonight? Not yet, I said. He didn't argue. Just nodded and left. I watched from the window as he disappeared down the corridor. Not triumphant. Not sad. Just whole. For the first time in a very long while. That evening, I didn't dress for dinner. No lipstick. No curling iron. No borrowed sparkle. I wore my soft house sweater, thick socks, and ate mushroom soup from a wide porcelain bowl while the sea slipped past like silk. No music. No expectations. No one needing me to hold the shape of someone else's comfort. For the first time in decades, I wasn't performing. Daniel's visit hadn't left me shaken. It had left me clear. The man I raised had stood in front of me, apologizing like a boy who broke a window and still didn't quite understand how. And strangely, that gave me peace. Like I had finally handed back a burden that never belonged to me. Later, the ship hosted its masquerade gala, an opulent affair in the main ballroom. Live swing music. Champagne fountains. Women in shimmering gowns and glittering masks. A little too much perfume in the air. I almost didn't go. Almost stayed curled up with my book and tea. But something stirred. Not pride. Not vengeance. Just curiosity. I dressed slowly. The deep navy dress I'd packed just in case its sleeves floated like smoke. A velvet mask in violet bought from the boutique on day 2. I pinned my hair up, stepped into soft heels. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. And for once, that felt right. The ballroom shimmered in gold and silver. The band played. Waiters glided like dancers. I stood near the back at first, sipping sparkling cider. Invisible again, but not unwanted. Then, a tap on my shoulder. May I? It was Clark, the journalist from the chef's dinner, now in a tailored black suit, wearing a half mask that made him look both mischievous and sharp, like someone who knew more than he let on. I nodded. We danced. Slowly at first. Then not so slowly. I laughed when he spun me gently. He didn't ask questions. Didn't compliment or hover. He just moved with me like we'd done it 100 times. You don't seem like someone who hides, he said during a pause. I did. For a long time, I replied. But now I've remembered how to stand in a room. He tilted his head. I'd say you never forgot. At one point, I stepped aside to catch my breath. That's when I saw them. Malcolm and Brielle, standing near the ballroom entrance. No masks, no mystery, just watching. They hadn't seen me yet. Leo stood between them, holding Ella's hand. His eyes scanned the crowd with quiet urgency. I recognized the look instantly, the need to spot something familiar in a world that's suddenly too large. And then he saw me. His face lit up. He leaned toward Ella and whispered. She tugged Brielle's hand, pointing. Brielle turned. Her mouth parted slightly. I stood still. Malcolm followed her gaze. His jaw tightened, not in anger, but out of habit. He raised a hand. Not quite a wave, just a gesture. A question. I nodded once. Then I turned back to Clark, who waited with 2 flutes, 1 champagne, 1 cider. He handed me the latter with a grin. Whoever they are, he said softly, they look like they've just remembered you're not invisible. I was never invisible, I said. They just stopped looking. The music shifted to another slow number. Care for one more? he asked. I took his hand. Over his shoulder, I saw Brielle and Malcolm still watching, frozen near the doorway, unsure whether to approach, unsure how to interrupt something they clearly hadn't expected. They didn't. And I was glad. Let them stay in the doorway for once. Let them feel what it's like to be the ones left wondering. Clark and I danced until the band played its final notes and the crowd thinned to murmurs and goodnights. He bowed slightly, kissed my knuckles, old-fashioned, unnecessary, charming all the same. I returned to my suite alone, mask still in hand, shoes dangling from my fingers. On the terrace, I stood barefoot beneath the stars. I had been seen, and I had chosen the moment myself. The morning after the masquerade, I woke with a peculiar weight in my chest. Not heaviness, fullness. Like a locked room inside me had finally been aired out. The mask lay on the desk where I'd left it. Velvet and ribbon, still holding the faint scent of Clark's cologne and my own perfume. I touched it absently, then turned away. No use clinging to metaphors. It had served its purpose. I'd worn it, danced in it, and more importantly, I'd removed it on my own terms. Lucas arrived with breakfast as usual, fresh coffee, 2 poached eggs, and a slice of sourdough toasted so perfectly it nearly brought tears to my eyes. You looked stunning last night, he said as he poured the coffee. They're still talking about you in the dining hall this morning. I'm sure they are, I smiled. Nothing more exciting on a ship than an old woman twirling in silk. He chuckled, but the warmth in his eyes wasn't pity, it was respect. The kind that sees you. When he left, I carried my plate out to the balcony. The sea was calm, smooth as glass. The sky above was the kind of early blue that looks like it's holding its breath. Then I heard it. A knock. Not at my door. The next one over. Voices followed. Soft. Careful. She danced, Brielle said. With that man. Everyone saw. I know, Malcolm replied. And she looked different. A pause. I know. Silence. Then, she's not going to just slip back into things when we get home, is she? Another pause. I don't think she should. I froze, my toast halfway to my mouth. It was the first time I'd heard that tone in his voice. A mix of regret and something else. Maybe. Recognition. As if he'd glimpsed me and didn't know how to fit the pieces together anymore. I stepped back inside quietly and closed the balcony door. I didn't need to hear any more. That afternoon, I took a long walk across the upper decks. Passengers nodded at me, not necessarily because they recognized me from the night before, but because I walked differently now. Back straight, eyes up, the way women do when they remember they were never meant to be tucked away. I passed the boutique and caught sight of Irene through the glass, trying on a wide-brimmed sun hat. I stepped inside and tilted my head. Too dramatic? She asked. Not dramatic enough, I said. Take the red one. She laughed and handed it to the clerk. We walked together to the lounge for afternoon tea, 2 women of a certain age, moving with the kind of ease you only earn when there's no one left to impress. As we settled into a booth, I spotted Leo across the atrium, seated with Ella at a table scattered with puzzle pieces. He looked up, saw me, and raised his hand barely above shoulder height. A quiet signal. I see you. I raised mine back. A moment later, Brielle rounded the corner and spotted us. She hesitated. She didn't come over, but she nodded, and that was enough. That night, I dressed simply. No glitter, no fanfare. Just the navy jumpsuit again, the one that moved the right way when I walked and made me feel like I still knew how to carry myself. I hadn't planned to attend the gala dinner, but Clark had left a note with Lucas that morning. If you're tired of dancing with yourself, I'll be near the champagne fountain. So I went. The dining hall was awash in golden light and white linen. The sound of polished silver and quiet luxury hummed beneath a string quartet playing something I didn't recognize, but that suited the room. Clark was already there, holding 2 glasses of something fizzy. Thought I might find you, he said. You're persistent. I'm curious. We didn't dance that night. Instead, we talked about books, places we hadn't been, and how aging seems to shrink the world until you remember. You can redraw the map yourself. At one point, I looked across the room and saw Malcolm watching us. He wasn't angry. Not confused either. Just quiet. as if he were seeing someone he didn't quite recognize and trying to decide if he wanted to. When I returned to my suite, there was a note slipped under the door in his handwriting. Can we have breakfast? Just you and me. No expectations. No explanations. Just coffee and time. M. I stood there holding it for a long time. Then I folded it neatly, set it beside the velvet mask on the desk, and turned off the light. Not as rejection, but because for the first time in my life, I wanted to choose my mornings. The next morning, I didn't answer the note. Not out of spite. Not to prove a point. I just wasn't ready. I'd spent the better part of my adult life answering without pause. The door, the phone, the cries, the sighs, the thousand quiet needs of a family that didn't always ask if I had any of my own. I had answered when silence would have served me better. So no, I didn't respond. I went walking instead. Deck 5, port side, the quiet side, where the shuffleboard courts sat unused and the lifeboats hung in obedient orange rose like punctuation, waiting for the story to shift. I walked slowly, hands clasped behind my back. Not for the exercise, for the stillness. I passed a man dozing under a towel, a crew member polishing railings, a couple arguing softly in a language I didn't recognize. I stopped at the railing and watched the horizon. It was pale silver that morning, the kind of sky that makes you believe the world might still be capable of forgiveness. Then I turned, and there he was. Malcolm, not dressed up, just in shorts and a faded shirt, coffee in one hand, the other tucked deep into a pocket like he didn't know what else to do with it. He didn't speak at first. Neither did I. We stood there together, caught somewhere between the past and the present. I didn't mean for things to feel like this, he said finally. I nodded. I know. I didn't realize. He trailed off, then let out a dry, humorless laugh. I didn't realize how small we'd made your life. The words weren't sharp, but they hit something soft inside me. You didn't make it small, I said quietly. I let it shrink. Every time I said yes when I meant no. Every time I chose silence instead of asking for more. He looked down. I thought I was helping. I know, I said. And I thought I was loving you by staying useful. We stood there, the wind pressing gently around us. Far above, gulls circled in slow loops. Then he said, you were right not to tell us. You deserved this on your own terms. I didn't thank him. It didn't feel like a compliment. It felt like truth, finally said aloud. You and 𝑀𝒉𝒆? I asked carefully. Are you two, okay? He gave a tired smile. We're working on it. Vacations don't fix anything. They just show you where the cracks are. I looked at him, the man I'd raised, who now looked so much like his father when time wore him thin. And I felt a strange ache. Not regret. Just distance. Time passed. Roads taken. Leo and Ella, I said. He nodded. They're good. They're kind. I adore them. Another pause. I don't know how to fix all of this, he said quietly. You don't have to, I replied. You just have to see it. Really see it. That's the beginning. He nodded again, slower this time. I'll let you be, he said, and turned to go. But before he left, I reached out and touched his arm. Malcolm. He looked back. Maybe tomorrow, breakfast. His smile was small, but it reached his eyes. I'll be there. That night, I sat on the terrace in my robe, knees pulled up, hands around a mug of peppermint tea. The ship moved steady beneath me, and for once, I didn't feel like I was chasing it. I was still. I was whole. And tomorrow, I would meet my son for breakfast. Not because he needed me, but because I chose to. We met at 8. I chose a table in the corner by the window, one with cushions, and a clear view of the endless blue. Not too close to the buffet. Not tucked away in shadow. I wanted light. I wanted space. Malcolm arrived right on time, 2 coffees in hand, looking like someone who hadn't slept well but had finally started to rest. He set 1 cup down in front of me. Still take it with cream? I still do, I said. He smiled. We sipped in silence for a few minutes. Ships are good for silence. There's always the hum beneath your feet, the hush of water brushing metal, the faint clatter of silverware somewhere nearby. The quiet isn't empty, only still. Eventually, he said, I don't know how you kept this from us. You made it easy, I replied, not unkindly. He winced. I mean that, I added. You were so certain I wouldn't come. You never checked in. Never asked if I'd changed my mind. You said your piece, that I'd slow things down, and that was that. He didn't argue. Just stirred his coffee with a plastic stick, the sound faint between us. I'm sorry, he said again. I know you've heard that before, but I am. I nodded. I believe you. And I also know it's going to take more than that. He looked up, and for a moment, I saw something honest flicker in his eyes. Not guilt, recognition. I think I started thinking of you as permanent, he said. Like furniture. Always there. Always given. You've been doing so much for so long, I forgot it was a choice. It stopped feeling like a choice a long time ago, I said. It became routine. Wake up. Help with the kids. Be useful. Be quiet. Be grateful for being allowed to tag along. He looked down. You deserved better. I deserve to be asked, I said gently. That's all. Not taken. Not assumed. Just asked. A pause. The waiter came to take our orders. He chose eggs and toast. I asked for oatmeal with fruit. After he left, Malcolm leaned forward. The kids know now. That you're here. Brielle didn't want to tell them at first. She was embarrassed, I think. But they found out. I nodded. Leo was the first. He says you're a spy. Malcolm smiled. Says you're on a secret mission to teach us manners. I chuckled. Smart boy. He looked out the window, then back at me. What happens when we get home? I shrugged. That depends. On whether you mean it when you say you want things to change. Because I do. I've lived more in these last 12 days than I have in years. I remembered who I was before I became convenient. And I don't want to forget again. He nodded slowly. Then we'll figure it out. Our food arrived. We ate quietly. I watched as he buttered his toast, too much in the center, none at the edges. Just like his father used to. I hadn't noticed it in years. After breakfast, we walked along the upper deck. Not speaking much, just relearning how to exist beside each other without filling the space. Something between us had shifted. Not healed. Not solved. Softened. Before we parted, he stopped. Will you come to dinner tonight? He asked. No fanfare. Just the five of us. No speeches. I hesitated, then said yes. His relief showed, though he kept it small. Back in my suite, I stood at the mirror. Same lines. Same hair tucked back with a clip. Same hands that had folded so many clothes, filled so many lunchboxes, wiped down so many counters. But the eyes, they were mine again. That evening, I knocked on suite 122 for the first time. Brielle opened the door. She didn't speak at first, but stepped aside. I walked in. Leo grinned. Ella ran to hug me, her damp hair still smelling of pool chlorine. Malcolm was already pulling out a chair for me. And for the first time in a very long time, I took my seat at their table, not as the helper, not as the extra, but as myself. Dinner was simple. No white linens. No violins. Just 5 people around a small, circular table, the kind where elbows knock and voices overlap. The children were still in swimsuits, bundled in oversized towels, cheeks pink from sun. Brielle had arranged room service plates, spaghetti, salad, little bottles of sparkling water with lemon slices. I brought nothing but myself. And it was enough. Leo sat beside me, leaning close like he still wasn't sure I was real. Ella climbed into my lap after just 2 bites, fingers sticky with sauce. No one stopped her. No one told her to sit properly. We were beyond that, at least for now. Malcolm poured water like it was wine. Brielle folded napkins with unnecessary precision. She didn't look at me often, but when she did, her gaze wasn't cold. It was cautious, uncertain. I could live with cautious. It was better than absence. We didn't talk about the cruise, or the suite, or the long silence that had settled between us over the years. We talked about tomorrow's port, about the iguanas Ella hoped to see, about Leo's new favorite trivia word, pulchritude, which he pronounced with theatrical flair. And still, beneath it all, the tension curled like a ribbon around the legs of the table. Quiet. Not gone. After dinner, Brielle began to clear the plates. I stood automatically, instinctively, the helper in me rising like muscle memory. But she stopped me. "I've got it," she said, not harsh, just firm. Our eyes met. "Okay," I said, and I sat back down. Later, Leo asked if I'd stay and read the bedtime story. It was an odd little book about a mouse detective and a jewel thief. Ella fell asleep halfway through, curled beside me, one hand still clutching the hem of my sleeve. Leo stayed awake, watching my face more than the pages. "Will you be at breakfast tomorrow?" he asked quietly when I closed the book. "I think I will." He nodded solemnly. "Good. You make better toast." I smiled and kissed his forehead. Malcolm walked me back to my suite. Not all the way, just part. We didn't speak. The ship was quiet now. Most of the late-night parties had thinned out, the long stretch of sea between ports having worn down even the most ambitious revelers. Before we reached my door, he stopped. "I should have seen it sooner," he said. "What we were doing. How much we took for granted." "You were busy building a life," I replied. "And I made it easy to forget I had one of my own." He nodded. "But you didn't lose it," he added. "You just paused it for us." "I paused it too long," I said softly. "That part's on me." We stood in the low hallway light, soft and golden. Then he surprised me. He hugged me. Not a quick, distracted hug. Not a pat and release. A real one. The kind that holds on a second longer than expected. I held him back. And for a moment, I felt every year collapse into that embrace, his first fever, his high school graduation, the night he called from his college dorm, voice shaking, because he'd locked his keys in the car and didn't know what to do. And then it passed. He pulled away. "Good night, Mom." "Good night." In the suite, I stood barefoot on the balcony. The sea stretched black and endless, not menacing, just open. Infinite. Waiting. And I understood something I hadn't before. This trip hadn't been about revenge. It wasn't about proving anything. Not about teaching lessons or demanding to be seen. It was about returning to myself and staying there. We docked in 𝒊𝒏𝒕 the next morning. The sun rose fast and hot, with that tropical intensity that makes even the shadows feel awake. From the balcony, I watched the early crowd pour down the gangway, couples in matching t-shirts, kids bouncing with anticipation, older men muttering about sunscreen and sandals. I didn't move. I had no interest in excursions or dolphin photos or bargaining for jewelry I'd never wear. What I wanted was here. Not in the destination, but in the stillness I'd finally carved out for myself. This quiet suite. This unhurried morning. This version of me that no longer asked permission to exist. By midday, the ship was almost empty. Even Lucas seemed to vanish. I ordered lunch from the cafe downstairs and carried it to the upper sun deck, the adults-only one with soft loungers and no music. Just wind and the rustle of leaves and artificial planters. I wasn't alone. Irene was already there, a book resting open on her lap. She looked up. "You're not in town?" I shook my head. "You, please." She scoffed. "Another market full of carved turtles. I've seen enough turtles to last me a lifetime." We sat together, not talking much. Just two women who had stopped apologizing for needing peace. "After a while," she said, "Clark told me you danced like someone who just remembered how." I smiled. Maybe I had. She closed her book. "You know, I've been traveling alone for 6 years. At first, it felt like exile. Then it felt like escape. Now, it just feels like living." I nodded. "That's the shift, isn't it? When it stops being running away and starts being arrival." She reached out, touched my arm, just for a second. "Whatever happens when you get home, don't shrink back." "I won't," I said. And I meant it. That evening, I returned to their suite, 122. This time, I knocked. Brielle answered. She looked tired, but not brittle. Her makeup was off, hair pulled back. And for the first time in years, she looked young, not in age, but in softness. She stepped aside. "They're drawing," she said. "Leo wanted to show you something." The children sat on the floor, markers spread out between them like confetti. Leo held up a folded sheet of paper. "It's the cruise," he explained. "But from your suite." He'd drawn the ship from above, balconies, pools, The big screen on the top deck, and in one corner, a neat square labeled Grandma's place, with a stick figure waving from a balcony to the stick figures below. "She sees everything," he said proudly. Brielle knelt beside him. "She does." Ella climbed into my lap again without hesitation. It was becoming her ritual. We spent the evening like that on the floor, surrounded by warmth and paper and tiny voices. Brielle joined the circle slowly, then naturally. At one point, she handed me a mug of tea. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Not just about the cruise. About how often I let you disappear into our convenience." I didn't answer right away. Then, "Thank you." Not forgiveness. Not yet, but acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. Later, Malcolm offered to walk me back again. I declined. "I want to walk by myself tonight," I said. "Of course." As I stepped into the corridor, Leo called after me. "Wait." He ran to me, arms wide, and hugged me tight. "Come to the kids' talent show tomorrow?" he asked. "I'm going to read my pirate poem." "I wouldn't miss it," I said. He grinned, already turning back, his bare feet thudding softly on the carpet. In the hallway, I walked slowly. The ship rocked gently beneath me, the kind of movement it always made the night before docking. Like it already knew its passengers were about to leave. And maybe it would miss us a little too. Back in the suite, I poured myself one final glass of wine. Not to celebrate, not to relax, just to mark the moment. Tomorrow, we'd dock. The day after, we'd return to solid ground, unread messages, overfull laundry baskets, and the relentless tempo of everyday life. But tonight, I was still here. Still on this floating edge of time. Exactly where I chose to be. Disembarkation Day has its own rhythm. Rushed. Antsy. Inevitable. Suitcases lined the hallways like obstacles in a maze. The PA system echoed with instructions no one quite listened to. Passengers stood in long coffee lines, knowing they wouldn't finish their cups. The ship, once a world of its own, had shifted. It now felt like a waiting room with prettier wallpaper. I didn't rush. My bags had been collected the night before, folded, zipped, tagged. Not because I was eager to leave, but because I'd already packed what mattered. And none of it was in the luggage. It was in the little girl who had curled into my lap like she belonged there. In the boy who drew a ship and labeled the highest sweet grandma's place, with me waving from the balcony. In the man who, for the first time in decades, had looked at me and seen me. Not as a fixture, but as a woman. As a mother. And in me. The version of myself who no longer waited for permission to take up space. There was a knock. One soft tap. "Lucas. Ready, Miss Elin?" I nodded. "Thank you. For everything." He smiled, just a hint, and for a moment I thought he might say more. But he only bowed slightly and rolled the card away. I stood in the doorway a moment longer, then turned and walked one last circuit of the suite. My fingertips brushed the marble counter, the arm of the chair where I'd read the hollow palm and listened to the sea hum like a secret, the frame of the mirror where I had finally recognized the woman staring back. I stepped out onto the balcony. The port below was already buzzing, taxis lining up like beetles, porters shouting names, bags tumbling over curbs. The air was thicker here, laced with diesel and hot pavement. But I didn't mind. It smelled like return. It smelled like choice. I heard footsteps behind me. Then Malcolm's voice. "They're holding our spot in Group 7. I turned. He stood with Brielle beside him, Leo between them, and Ella on her hip, clutching a stuffed bear like it was currency. "We can wait," I said. He nodded. None of us moved for a while. Then Ella wriggled to the ground and reached for my hand. "I drew you again," she announced, eyes wide. "But this time in a garden. You're wearing a crown." I smiled. "What kind of garden?" "Tomatoes," she said seriously. "And beans. And flowers. That sounds perfect." Leo tugged gently at my sleeve. "Can we come visit your house sometime?" he asked. "I want to see your garden too. Not just the drawing." I knelt down so we were eye to eye. "You can come. But next time, I'm not cooking every meal." "Understand." He grinned. "Deal." Brielle stepped forward. There was something new in her expression. Not apology. Not guilt. Just an open door. "I'd like to help," she said softly. "If you'll let me." I held her gaze. "We'll start small." Malcolm checked his watch, then looked at me. "You okay?" "I'm good." A beat. Better than good. We walked the gangway together. No grand speeches. No send-off. Just the sound of the sea behind us and the quiet rhythm of suitcase wheels dragging over sun-baked concrete. Outside, the taxis idled in long rows. The light was too bright, everything too fast. And yet, I didn't feel behind. I felt ready. At the curb, Leo turned to me. "You didn't seem old on the ship," he said, like a scientist making a discovery. I blinked. "What do I seem like now?" He shrugged. "Just tall." I laughed. We said our goodbyes with real hugs this time. Not rushed. Not polite. The kind of hugs that hold on and leave something behind. Then I climbed into my taxi alone. As we pulled away, I didn't look back at the ship. I'd already taken what I needed. Back home, there would be bills. There would be groceries. Dust on the windowsill. The usual. But there would also be my garden. My bed. My pace. And no more asking to be seen. Because I had seen myself. And that was the beginning of everything. Sweetheart, don't forget to subscribe and leave me a little note in the comments. I love hearing from you.